are back with our political panel. Sabrina Rodriguez covers politics at the Wall Street Journal. Paul Kane reports on Congress and politics for NOTUS, or News of the United States. Toluse Olorunnipa is a staff writer at The Atlantic, and our executive director of elections and surveys, Anthony Salvanto, is back with us as well. This is kind of a Washington Post reunion. A handful of us have worked there before. We're very proud of the work they continue to do. And it's the first time for both of you. But Sabrina, ladies first. We look at this ongoing struggle in the Democratic Party to define what it is and how to win. You've been out and about. And I was struck by something someone said to you out in Wisconsin in recent days. They said, the Midwest is not Manhattan. There are limits here. It seems the far left may have actually hit a bit of a wall, at least in the last few days.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw in both Wisconsin and Michigan, I think, coming out of the New York primary, there's been so much conversation around this democratic socialism versus establishment fight that's playing out in the party. But there was the big question, okay, in a state like Michigan, in a state like Wisconsin, states that voted for Donald Trump, these, chronically extremely purple states, is there a lane? And clearly the verdict is it's very divided. It's very complicated. Seeing Abdul El-Sayed's win in Michigan, yes, it's a big win for the far left, but there is the question mark. He won by 1 percentage point. So we're seeing this fight playing out, and it's clearly far from over in terms of what direction the party's going in.
Paul, who's also making his Face the Nation debut, you have covered Congress, especially, and the contours of the two conferences for this entire century. So you've seen this once or twice. And that's not to call you old, it's to say that you're not. But you've seen a thing or two when it comes to congressional races. And my point is, we've seen the two parties go through cycles like this. And you've written recently that the Democrats have the potential to take back the majority, but may not be able to do it to the extent that they could have in other cycles if they nominate too many extremist candidates.
There are, for people my age, a lot of us look at this and think, wow, it's 2006. All over again. Our friend Amy Walter tweeted that, like, she's got a sense of deja vu. There are sex scandals happening, a war in the Middle East, the president in his second term, very unpopular. But at the same time, there's also some 2022 deja vu, where Republicans had a lot of great political environment that was going on, but they nominated, not just in the Senate, where candidates like Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker got a lot of attention, but they nominated a half dozen to a dozen candidates in winnable districts in the House that were just outside of that general mainstream. And they ended up not getting that sort of big bounce. And they ended up with a majority at just 222 seats with 4 votes to spare if everybody shows up. And so there are some similarities to 2022 that could be happening here, where the wrong candidates in the wrong districts in the wrong states might end up not giving the Democrats the sort of election that they could have otherwise.
And Toluse, I know that was part of the concern in Michigan, whereas Sabrina said he only won by 1 point outside, and now there's been polling that suggests he's underwater against the Republican Mike Rogers.
And he realizes that, and that's part of the reason he's trying to move things in a direction of saying he wants to be conciliatory, he wants to have a big tent, he wants to reach out to people who did not vote for him, he wants to reach out to some of those working class voters, some of those black voters who voted for Haley Stevens. He's talked about that on the campaign trail. But this broader civil war that's taking place within the Democratic Party, it's really right underneath the surface of all of this sort of kumbaya work together. There's a big tent. We're all united more than we're divided. Right underneath that, there's a lot of opposition between the two sides of the party. And if they're able to muscle their way through to November, I suspect that a lot of those divisions will pop back up as soon as we have to figure out who the speaker is going to be. We heard from Hakeem Jeffries that he does not support the DSA agenda earlier today. And so there's going to be a lot of working out they're going to have to do to get together if they're able to win the House in November.
Signal he doesn't support the DSA agenda, signal he doesn't support Medicare for all, and what does Chris Rabb say? I haven't heard from him yet, so I don't know if I'm voting for him. That's the kind of trouble that could be coming if they govern, or try to govern.
Yeah, well, that was, you look at 2022, and Kevin McCarthy only has a couple votes to spare, and he ends up getting held hostage again and again for almost 9 months until they kick him out. And then Mike Johnson becomes speaker, and he gets held hostage. When you only win a majority by a couple of votes, it gives an opportunity for mischief making among just a few members. And that's what Hakeem Jeffries could face if they don't win a big enough majority. Or if he doesn't win the majority, it's an even bigger problem.
I would just add, I mean, I think one of the most striking things to me from the poll this morning is the fact that the majority of voters regard the Democratic Party as weak, and that a majority of voters do not think that the Democratic Party is effective. So I know there's this ideological debate that's happening within the party, but part of the opening that Democratic Socialists and the progressive left have had this year is because of the repercussions from the 2024 election, from those bruising losses, and this feeling like, what exactly is the party doing? We lost to Donald Trump in 2024. We're heading into a midterm. What exactly is fighting Donald Trump look like? What wins have actually been accomplished in the last 2 years? And a lot of frustration from the Democratic base questioning what exactly does the Democratic Party stand for and how exactly are we going to win?
Yeah. You found something interesting in the poll regarding Democratic and Republican support when it comes to the economy over a key concept.
Oh, price controls.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is for all this talk about ideology, you do see that there's a certain, you might generously call it pragmatism, in an economy where so many people are complaining about inflation. So you ask about price controls in general, and yes, you find a large number of Democrats in favor of independence, but also a slight majority of Republicans. And that's part of what it tells you. Not everybody sits there and maps everything onto an ideological framework for this in this kind of environment.
And the president has been not certainly not at all extreme to the left on this, but he has talked about price controls for different types of or different elements of the economy. So they must see this or understand that it is something that finds general support.
Yeah, and within the Republican Party, it's interesting too, for all our talk about the Democrats, there's a big gap between the way that Republicans rate the president on issues like immigration and even foreign policy, and then on inflation in particular, where it's lower, and it's hovered around 20 points lower, still improving, but not as high. And that gap is going to be important because when we do get to the midterms, one of the key questions, I think, is going to be what happens to the Republicans who are a little bit dissatisfied with the president. They don't dislike him, but on that issue, maybe not so much.
So speaking of the numbers and the way things are tracking, can you give us a sense of where at least CBS sees the House and the Senate sitting right now?
Well, one of the key things, and you started to raise it, is that it's different structurally from those last couple of midterms because partisanship has kind of sorted out all of the marginal districts. In fact, there aren't that many. So to your point, Ed, there's maybe under 20, depending on how you count it, and we do, that are true toss-up House districts, which means that if you just look at the partisan breaks on them, you know, it's within maybe 5 or 6 points, something you could move in a persuasion campaign like that. So that really constrains the number in the House at the outset. And then at the Senate side, you have this different dynamic where you don't have a whole lot of competitive races out of the whole scope, but you have Democrats trying to pick up seats from the Republicans in places where they've had a tough time. I'll pick out Texas as one. They've had a tough time historically winning, very tough. So that kind of map, it's an interesting dynamic, to say the least.
If we can bring back up that Senate map, I want people to sit with the idea of Texas being a light shade of red this year. That's kind of the one that's sitting out there as the maybe. When you, Toluse, talk to Democrats, Sabrina, when you talk to them, how confident do they feel about that one happening?
Texas is a big challenge for Democrats, in part because they've been trying to win Texas for the last 30-odd years, and it's always seemed like the one that gets away. It's a big state. There are a lot of Republicans there. It's a structurally Republican-leaning state. And so the fact that Republicans have a flawed candidate and Democrats have what they feel is a candidate that can compete for some of those moderate voters, some of those evangelical voters, some of the voters that are a little bit less ideological and less willing to vote for a flawed Republican who has issues, both corruption issues and issues in his own personal life. They think that the mix is right for the Democrats to win this year, but it is a very big state. It's a very big challenge, and it seems like they're on an uphill climb to try to win that state.
Do they have a sense of what it takes?
I mean, it's been the elusive dream for Democrats for a while, as you said. I mean, it's been since 1994 no Democrat has won a statewide, a statewide race in Texas. However, there is this opening when you look at, for example, Hispanic voters. You and I have talked to many of them in Texas that moved towards Donald Trump in the 2024 election. They see an opening with James Tallarico. Now, it certainly doesn't help him to get tied to the Democratic Socialists in a state like Texas. But again, the Democrats are seeing this real opening because of who Ken Paxton is, because of all the baggage he brings, because of the fact that he had an extremely messy primary that went into a runoff. We're talking about almost $100 million that were spent in anti-Paxton ads. And that sort of helps this perfect storm, but it's certainly far from guaranteed.
But temper the expectations, because we've talked about this, at least internally. There's a math issue for Democrats, not only in Texas, but in Iowa, potentially in Alaska, and those other ones where they think they now have a shot.
Yeah, well, the math issue in Texas is that you need to move a whole heck of a lot more voters just to make that percentage. A percentage in Texas is not the same thing as a percentage in Iowa. So you may see the Democrats try to invest more in places where there just aren't as many voters that you need to swing. The other polling part of this, too, is you look at maybe an even poll, maybe one that's in the margin of error, but historically, and this is a case perhaps in Maine, I think, historically, Susan Collins has turned out her voters.
Right.
And she's got people there who have voted for her over many, many cycles. You're going against that kind of a headwind. So even if you see a 1 or 2 point gap in the polls, that's part of the structure.
So in 2006, they won 6 Senate seats, Democrats, 4 of which had just voted for George W. Bush 2 years earlier. But in at least 2 of them, there were third-party, right-leaning, libertarian type of voters, like in Montana, that gave the sort of, you were talking about the soft Trump supporters, who are people who are a little bit upset about inflation and the war. It's hard for them to vote for a Democrat. And so in some of these states, they might need that third-party person to give that soft Trump supporter, oh, I'm not going to vote for Tallarico, but I'm not going to vote for Paxton, and I'll vote for the Libertarian, so that they can win without clearing 50%. Because it's so hard to get over 50% for a Democrat in these states like Iowa, Ohio, and Texas.
Real quick in our remaining seconds here, the South Carolina Republican runoff in about 10 days. Is Darlene Graham in trouble against Ralph Norman?
Look, her brother spent $20 million in his primary in June just so that he would not get put into a runoff, because he knew that the South Carolina primary runoff voters are not Lindsey Graham voters. They are more bright red. Now you have a late August special election primary runoff where she started with 33%. It's not clear that she can win unless Trump really goes there and really lays down the law and says you got to vote for her.
Well, we'll see if he does that in the next few days, because to spend his political capital there would be telling with less than 80 days to go to Election Day. Sabrina, Paul, Anthony, Toluse, thanks for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll be back in a moment.